The world has changed in the last 50 years, and since our countries emerged from colonization. Although the continent is generally enjoying greater prosperity and, I would say, opportunities for progress in recent years, that progress has not trickled down to millions and millions of poor Africans, and we are saddled with about some 265 million Africans who are going to bed hungry every day. Africa is the one continent today that is not able to feed itself for many reasons. One, because of the low productivity. That's for sure. A different version of that slide was shown yesterday. But this is combined also with the comparisons between progress made in Asia, Southeast Asia, and progress made in Africa. We can see that the progress made in Southeast Asia is mostly in reducing the poverty of the bottom half of their population, which was about 78%, was poor, like in Africa. In Africa, we have not had systems that have been able to address the bottom part of our population. We can see that progress has been made in the top half of our population, but not the bottom half of our population. And that is the real difference. And since the bottom half of our population is heavily engaged in agriculture, and that was the same case in Asia in the 1960s, we should have approaches which really address the issues that concern the bottom half of our population. Mr. Chairman, but allow me to say a few words about the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, of which I'm president. This organization was created in 2006, initially with strong support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, and then joined by DFID and now Sweden and Denmark and the IDRC of Canada and USAID now and a few other donor organizations to be able to work with African governments, African farmers organizations, and other stakeholders on the continent to bring about a transformation of Africa's agriculture from the low input, low output to something which is slightly more progressive that will actually give farmers a way of life. Rather than considering agriculture just as a way of life, more as a business, as agribusiness, because they invest their resources in this. And this really came with the footsteps of the decisions taken by our heads of state, our heads of government in Maputo to allocate some 10% of their own budgetary resources to agriculture. And we were already told that only about, 7 or 8 countries have reached the 10%, but progress is being made towards that direction. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no need for me to overemphasize the role of agriculture plays in employment, economic growth, poverty reduction in Africa. I think that was very aptly presented yesterday. This has been articulated by NEPAD, CAADP, IFPRI, the World Bank, FAO, and many other global institutions. So, however, allow me to say that agriculture is by far the most important sector for any reform agenda in Africa and the main catalyst for ending poverty on the continent. If we can double the productivity and incomes of smallholder farmers, who constitute 70% of our population, automatically we would already be getting minimum 7 to 10% economic growth on the continent just by being able to support their own production increases. If we are not able to change them, it would be very much difficult. Even if you brought a 100% increase in the, let me say, the technology, information technology business, which is fantastic, it's attractive, it's sexy. But even if you doubled and tripled and quadrupled it, it does not really move that kind of movement on the African economies. So we do need to be able to invest in that. There is therefore no better place to invest in agriculture than in agriculture, because really for today, it's not that tomorrow it will be the best place to invest, but it's the best place to invest today in Africa when 70% of the population is engaged in agriculture. I was listening to TV this morning about Japanese agriculture. It's 1% of the economy, 1% of the economy, 1. But the attention that the Japanese farmers receive from the government, I mean, it's beyond the attention that we give to 70% of our population. Clearly, something must be wrong. It is also shameful that as we speak, we do not have money in Africa, but we spend some $30, $40 billion every year to import food. But we don't have money. We have land, we have people, we have water, we have other things. We should be able to challenge ourselves to turn that around. Use those $30 or $40 billion a year to develop infrastructure, to do other things that we need in our continent, rather than supporting farmers in other parts of the world. Let's support our own farmers. AGRA is interested in working actively with all stakeholders in order to be able to focus in smallholder farmers and be able to give them the capacity that they require by developing the technologies that they require. I mean, technology is a heavy word. Let me say by developing the appropriate inputs that they require for agriculture, like seed. African agriculture is different from Asian agriculture. It's very complicated, microecology based, and we are dealing with many, many crops. The slide shows the different crops that AGRA is putting effort to improve, let me say, genetically by plant breeding. 12 different crops, of which before, historically, maize received the major attention. You can now see that we are trying to balance that equation for cassava and beans and rice and sorghum and the other crops which are of interest in Africa. And here in Ethiopia, we are now taking on teff and faba beans, because that is really, those two crops are very important in their diet. And I think the next slide, please. We can see, sorry that the slide is not shown very well, but it's showing that AGRA, we are attacking it by supporting small seed companies that are agroecologically based, producing seed, multiplying seed for the smallholder farmers. We are now supporting some 60 seed enterprises in 13 countries in Africa that last year produced 25,000 metric tons of seed, and we expect this year some 40,000 metric tons of seed. And in 2018, we expect some 250,000 metric tons of seed, enough to plant between 12 and 15 million hectares of land. At that scale, we'll be beginning to see the transformation of African agriculture. We need to take it to scale. Clearly, it's only seed is not enough. The next slide, please. Seed is not enough. The same seed variety, improved variety, with and without fertilizer. We have some religious crusade going around that African agriculture does not need fertilizer. Okay? Clearly, we can see for ourselves. If we want our farmers to be trapped with what we see on the foreground versus what we see on the background, then maybe that we can believe in that doctrine. But clearly, it's not that Africa needs to apply 500 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare as done in some countries in the world. We are still at 9 kilograms per hectare, 9 kilograms per hectare. Please, if we could get to 15, 20, 30 kilograms per hectare, hunger in Africa will be history. I don't think that anybody needs really to be able to argue that. And we are trying to upscale now what was old technology, what we call now an innovation. When I left university in 1968, my first job was in the extension service in Cameroon. We used to use fertilizer, Coca-Cola caps, to try to show farmers to use Coca-Cola caps. Today it has become a new technology. Okay? So we are calling it now microdosing. Okay? How to get farmers to use 1/3 of the fertilizer recommendation instead of the full recommendation of 100 kilograms per hectare. They use 30 kilograms per hectare and still get the equivalent yield as if they were using 100 kilograms per hectare by placing it with the seed. That's new, but I did it. I used it in '68. So let us try to use what is already existing and put it to use in the hands of our farmers, and let us move forward. AGRA, of course, we work with many partners within the CAADP framework, with the CG system, with FAO, with IFAD, and increasingly with the private sector, to be able to mobilize the resources domestically that can be put to the service of agriculture. Rather than speaking theoretically, let me use some key points in which we go. In order for the proposed green revolution to have the desired positive impact, some critical challenges need to be faced. One, the smallholder farmer has to be put in the center of Africa's discussions on agriculture. I know that it sounds like a broken record. Oh, why? Can we achieve a green revolution by smallholder farmers? Now, please, it is more difficult to organize services for smallholder farmers, I admit. But if we could work with 10 million, 20 million smallholder farmers working 2 hectares each, 20 million smallholder farmers on 2 hectares each is 40 million hectares. If we could increase production by 1 kilogram, 1 ton, metric ton per hectare on 40 million hectares, is 40 million tons. 40 million tons are enough to feed 200 million people in a year. We would have wiped out the hunger in Africa. The big farms still have a role to play. They still have. I'm a farmer myself. I don't have 2 hectares. I have 100 hectares. So I'm not preaching because it's just a fashion. The reality is that most of our farmers are small, and we should have systems, and I emphasize systems, not just projects, systems that deliver services to farmers through farmers' organizations. If the old cooperative movement lost support in Africa because it was heavily politicized, let us now use what is now in vogue, farmers' organizations. Let us use them to be able to deliver services to their members. Second, we have to have increased public investment in agriculture. That has been said over and over again. The governments should reach their 10% of budgetary allocations to agriculture before they can have the courage to face the donor community and ask for more support for agriculture. If you are not feeding your own children, it is difficult for you to go and ask your neighbor to give you money to feed your children when you have the money to do so. Feed your children first. With your own budget, it's not enough, so you ask for support. Let us use our own budgetary resources first and then ask for donor support to help us to go forward. It is not just hiring more civil servants, although we need a lot more extension agents. It is now to find the systems, how to support seed production, how to organize fertilizer delivery, how to organize maybe credit systems, how to be able to do storage and infrastructure to be able to support agriculture. Governments, please, should invest their resources in agriculture. Third is these supportive policies which has been spoken over and over again. We do need a policy framework. We already have the CADAP. The CADAP is general. CADAP now has gone to CADAP compacts, which are country-based. Fine. But we should have to go beyond just a piece of paper to implementation, to plans that really work in favor of making sure that the policies are supportive, the farmers can produce, they can sell, they can cross district boundaries, they can sell to neighboring countries, they have the ability to turn their effort into a real productive business, rather than just sitting around complaining that the government has put an export ban, the government is not able to fix a farm-to-market road. There will always be problems. But please, let governments try to put their emphasis where their mouths are. Fourth, markets. Farmer Kofi yesterday posed us lots of questions. What to do with his production? In fact, should be Farmer AGRA, because it's mostly women farmers. Okay. What to do with their production? But if a farmer, you are telling a farmer to buy improved seed, to buy fertilizer, to be able to spray their farms with insecticide or herbicide, whatever it is, are they investing money? They are not able to make a return. They must be fools to continue to accept such advice. No wonder a lot of busts have taken place, heavy production has taken place locally, but farmers soon after withdraw because they did not make any benefits from it. Who will be running an ICT center at a loss? Who will be running a motor garage, mechanic garage at a loss? Who is shoe mender will be mending shoes at a loss? Why should the farmer be farming at a loss? I know that for some, farming should not be equated as real strict business because it touches people's lives directly. But farmers are not in the humanitarian business. They are also producers, they are also investors and entrepreneurs. We need simple systems like warehouse receipt systems which permit aggregation of produce at farm level and at community level, so that they will be able to have the volume that is required to negotiate in structured markets, so that they are sure of what they are going to get. Fifth, I would say we do need to engage the private sector. The private sector, the farmers already are the private sector. The largest private sector in Africa is actually agriculture. But somehow, agriculture is seen as if it was some appendage of a government program. Government should support. But agriculture itself is private business, and therefore the formal private business needs to be able to invest and link with farmers, smallhold farmers, medium farmers, large farmers, to ensure that really this farming agricultural community gets the support and services that it requires. The private sector does not have to be the huge organizations. It can be the small agro-dealers, like I was showing, if they go back one slide, please, like the small traders that AGRA is supporting. Today, we have 11,000 of them in 13 countries, small agro-dealers. Some of them, their total capital of material they have probably is $1,000. I went to visit one in Kenya whose total stock was $600,000. Okay? So, the scale can vary. The essence is that they are closed in the community, closer to the farmers, and therefore are able to render services. First, they sell what the farmers need in small packages, what farmers can afford. At any time that they have a few dollars in their pockets equivalent, they can buy some of the inputs that they require. Plus, they are able also to give some of the technical information on how to use, and how to plant the seed, how to use fertilizer, how to use agrochemicals, some of the roles that the traditional public oriented extension service should be doing. If we were able to multiply that from 11,000 to 50,000 to 100,000 throughout Africa, I think there will be a real change. The private sector also includes the banking system. The banking system is very much averse to working with farmers, with agriculture, because it is disorganized. Because if there's no rain, of course, there will be no production, so the banks stand at a loss of their resources. We should work with them to reduce the risks. Technology is one thing, but you should be able to find administrative arrangements to reduce the risk to banks or risk aversion. AGRA, we are using another old, new innovation. Credit guarantee schemes existed before any of us in this room was born. But now it's a new innovation, okay, that we are now putting in place, credit guarantee schemes with commercial banks to increase the volume of financing available for agriculture, for smallholder agriculture. Kenya is our shining example in which, between AGRA and IFAD, we put together a $5 million credit guarantee scheme and mobilized $50 million in the equity bank. They have now given out at least $25 or $26 million, 2/3 of that to smallholder farmers. And the interest rate went down from 18% to 10%. Because the banks were more confident. The bank was more confident that it had a partner to share the risks. We have now done the biggest deal in Africa with Standard Bank of South Africa. We put together a package of $10 million, half of it AGRA and half of it with other partners, to mobilize $100 million. For Ghana, $25 million, Uganda, $25 million, Tanzania, $25, and Mozambique, $25 million. And the loans, you can see there, are being disbursed. It's only 1.5 years old, and you can see what was taking place. Mozambique is particularly weak because they didn't have the structures. They are now only picking up. But we have confidence that within 3 years or 4 years, it will be totally dispersed. We have now moved to a new innovation in banking by working with the national governments. And Nigeria is our first example, where we're working with the Central Bank of Nigeria to be able to use $500 million of their own money to mobilize $3 billion for agricultural development in Nigeria from the private sector banks. In Kenya, we are working with the government to use $65 million of their own money, not $1 from AGRA, to be able to put up a scheme following the Equity Bank example to mobilize $650 million for agriculture in Kenya. Clearly, if African countries were able to use some of these old innovations, okay, we will be able to put together structures which will transform Africa's agriculture, allow farmers to have access to the inputs that they need to increase productivity. If the productivity does not go up, we will be extending land clearing, we will be contributing to global warming, we will be increasing the hazards to African agriculture, because Africa is the region that is picked to be the worst impacted upon by climate change. Although it is a small contribution we make to climate change, we have to do everything possible to minimize whatever further damage we make to climate change. The last key point I would like to make, Mr. Chairman, is that the vast majority of African food crop farmers are women. they are women. We cannot deny that fact. We must have systems which are accessible to women as a group. If we do not have systems that are accessible to women, we can say smallholder farmers. That's generic. Most of the smallholder farmers are women. So the issues of land rights, even if it's not outright ownership certificate of land, at least land use rights for the land, so that they can invest on improving the land. If you don't own a car, you don't wash it. How many people go and wash a rented car? If you are renting farmland, why would you be caring for it? So please, let us try and influence our governments to be able to put in place those measures which can change. We need an extension service that is also accessible to women. We need to increase the number of women extension agents. We need to increase the number of women research scientists. We need to increase the number of women administrators. I mean, if we do not really have access to women, I'm sorry that a lot of the technologies that will be developed will not be used by smallholder farmers, and therefore we will not get the results that we are looking for. Finally, Mr. Chairman, it was Nelson Mandela who said, "There is no such thing as part freedom." Today, as we meet to deliberate on productivity, enhancing technologies, boosting agricultural production and food security in Africa, let us aim to free Africa from the shackles of hunger, having unshackled ourselves from the burdens of colonialism and apartheid. Let us discuss practical ideas that will put food on the table for millions of disenfranchised citizens across Africa. Let us be bold and courageous in making our recommendations. Let us dare to dream of the day when our farmers will produce more than their families can eat, and when, thanks to enhanced smallholder farmer productivity, an African Green Revolution is fully achieved. Thank you very much.